Holy crap. How's everybody doing? Good?
Surviving,
All
I
right,
think.
hopefully. So this is our last class for this week, obviously, because it's Friday. We will have Monday, Wednesday next week. On Monday, one of my former teachers, Andy Klassen, is going to be in to talk about how he's been creating a lot of the multi-track audio and multi-track video during the pandemic to keep himself entertained. So he's going to talk about how he does that. He's going to show you his solo arrangement of Channel One suite that he did, which is pretty awesome, with him playing everything but the rhythm section instruments. So that's going to be pretty rad. And then on Wednesday, Chad Eby from UNCG will be here, and he's going to talk about Duke Ellington's "Such Sweet Thunder" album, which is a killer. And I'll throw that up on Spotify so you can check that all out. And then we'll be done for the semester. Hooray! Our guest today should be familiar to a lot of you. Cyrus Pace teaches jazz improvisation and in normal semesters jazz combo here at Virginia Tech, and he's going to talk to us all about the great Count Basie. Take it away, Cyrus.
Thank you. All right. You guys can hear me okay? Thumbs up? Yeah, all right. Nice to see you guys. Want to mention real quick that you probably know this, but in addition to my work at Virginia Tech, I also run the Jefferson Center, which in normal times we'd be presenting a lot of music from our stage, from one hall with 900 seats and one hall with 150 seats. All of that, of course, is on hold. Looks like it'll be on hold still through probably fall of 21, although we do still have some things holding on. I don't think they're going to hold on for long. But as I offered to folks all the time, if you're on the scene and we're doing something and it's something you want to see or be part of, just let me know. If you can't afford a student ticket, I will provide a ticket to you. And with the spirit of that in mind, if you'd like to use the discount code STUDENT for our current series, which is Listen Now, Gather Later, there are 2 great jazz performances on there, including, by the way, one by Chad Eby, who you're going to talk to next week, and Ariel Pokaka. So that's a duo, piano and tenor saxophone. And then we also had Renee Marie come in from Fredericksburg and record, and she brought in the exceptional bass player, piano player from Michigan, Xavier Davis, who used to teach at Juilliard Jazz and is now the director of the jazz program at Michigan. So, and that's also a really great performance. So you can get those for free by using the student discount code. Basically put student in. You do have to sign up for an account so that we can email you and confirm it, but pretty cool. Both are great. They're about an hour. And I'm really proud of the video and audio quality on both of those. And of course, artistically, they're very solid. All right, so moving on to Basie. So for me, my relationship, not just sort of as a guitar player, but also because of my particular trajectory as a player in the big band environment, was always more about Count Basie than it was about Duke Ellington or Tommy Dorsey or any of those other bands. I don't know why that is, particularly other than my band director in high school was a huge Basie fan. We very rarely played Duke Ellington charts. But the other reason is he had his own professional big band, and it trended towards Basie tunes and things which were infinitely danceable. I think was probably the key for that, because we did a lot of gigs, and I did a lot of gigs with him when I was 16 and 17 before I joined the Navy band. And of course, the Navy band is also, those groups really trend towards more Basie style playing, even though we think of Tommy Dorsey and those bands as being foundational for the Army and Navy bands. The bands very clearly played more Basie than anything else. So that's good for a guitar player, as you probably know, because Basie at least had charts for Freddie Green, the guitar player in the band. And of course, more of the more modern Basie stuff had written parts for a guitar that wasn't just that standard Freddie Green on all 4 type strumming thing, which we can talk about a little bit here as well. So if you ask me, why Basie, for me, it's the fact that it's really functional in terms of time and feel. And I want to define both of those for you because they're different things. People use the word, man, yeah, it's great time. well, and then they really mean he has great feel, or she has great feel, but they're talking about the fact that she has really great time. So time is really just tempo, right? It's the ability to play at tempo without wavering. That's really good time. So a drummer who can play, at 64 beats a minute, really solidly without shifting time, that's time. Feel is how you act and how you behave and where you place notes within that time. Okay, so particularly as a rhythm section person, I'm actually more consistently thinking about time and feel than anything else, right? So I prioritize time and feel. The feel that's most consistent with the music we're going to listen to today, of course, is swing. And for those of you who have been in class with me before, you may know this, but I'm not a big advocate for people trying to figure out what swing is, or try to regurgitate what they hear from a Count Basie record. In terms of feel, I think feel can be innate. And it should often be what you feel like feels the best, right? If you've worked on the way to phrase things, if you've worked on how to articulate phrases, if you've worked on being able to play the phrases at tempo, I think it becomes kind of hokey pokey, frankly, when you try to get the do-be-do-be-do ta 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 ta, and that's what ends up happening. And you hear that a lot, and of course, high school big bands, right? Who, they've got really good directors who don't necessarily know how to encourage people to play things that just feel good, and that it's okay even if it doesn't sound authentically swingy. And as we're going to find today, the concept of swing has changed dramatically over the last 100 years anyway, right? So when people are like, yeah, it's swing. Well, swing is 120 years of music. It was very different for Kid Ory than it is from Wynton Marsalis. It's very different from Art Tatum to Jason Moran today. So I think of swing as not necessarily being just an idiom, but when people say, this is a swing tune, that can be a million different things. And I think it should err on the side of doing what feels most danceable and what feels the best. And the beautiful part about big bands for me is that you've got, 15, 20 players coming together and figuring out what that is in terms of feeling. Thinking about how to play something that feels good to each other, and hopefully will feel good to the audience. And again, with the priority being, if it feels good and it feels danceable, it's probably going to be fine. It's probably going to work, even if it isn't historically accurate, which I don't even know what that would be anymore. I mean, the most historically accurate swing for me would probably be, Duke Ellington in the late 1940s, or Nat King Cole in that same era, or Basie in the 50s, or that for me is maybe authentic traditional swing. But now it's very clearly a completely different concept. Okay, so again, don't use time and feel as being the same thing. Time is the bass player is sticking to the role and the tempo and not letting that waver. And then feel is what you place above time. That's where the beautiful stuff happens. You don't have to worry about the time. If everybody's been working with their metronome, you're going to be fine there. So speaking of that, these are things that you can be working on, virtually in distance now. So, go online and find a, second saxophone chart as any instrument and play through it with your metronome on 2 and 4 and record yourself playing through it, or your metronome on just 4, right? So 1, 2, 3, click, 1, 2, 3, click. Record yourself playing that chart and listen back to yourself and analyze whether or not you played it, whether you feel like you played it with really good feel and really good time. If you do that work while in virtual, honestly, if all the players in the world do that while in the virtual setting, all the bands that come back together are going to be so much better if they use the time for that purpose. So one of my additional important points is really, if your metronome isn't on, you're not actually practicing, so put the metronome on 2 and 4, just 2, or all 4, or whatever, sometimes 1 and 3, whatever it is, and really analyze whether you have the kind of time that you think that you do, and be really reflective with yourself and provide feedback on whether or not your feel makes sense for that particular phrase, that particular chart, and that particular tempo. That's how you get better at that. I've said this already in a way, but I think swing has also become sort of an academic concept. And that's not at all good, other than the fact that it keeps it in school systems and keeps it in the collegiate setting, which I think is good. But we're talking about an oral tradition here. I remember, I guess maybe it was Liam in our improv class, we were talking about the fact that, back in the 40s and 50s, our version of these guys is they were taking turntables, right? And then putting the needle down and listening to Charlie Parker just long enough to figure out a phrase, and then pick up and then put it down and pick it up and put it down, and how hard it was to do that. That is true. I think it was harder to transcribe and get to know the music in that way from home if you lived in a rural community in North Dakota. But really, in truth, in the 1980s, I grew up in a community with a couple of really good big bands, even here in Roanoke, and I played in them. And there was a really good jazz director at my high school. So when I joined the Navy band at 17 and went to A school, I tested out in 2 months. It's supposed to be 6 months. They said 2 months, you're good to go. And I shipped off to Guam to play. They needed a player there. And they're like, he can already play these charts. So this music is an oral tradition. We're better at it if we're around people who are helping us sort stuff out, right? Like this rarity of information that we claim there is really, wasn't true in the 1980s, the 1990s probably even. And it isn't true now, of course, because you can open up YouTube and learn just as much as you want. You can actually watch George Benson playing. You can actually watch Lester Young's recordings and watch sort of the physicality of what he's doing, which is the next point I want to make, that, I'm just going to be playing some Count Basie for you today, but I do want you to spend some time going back and checking out videos of these bands. There's a physicality to what they're doing, right? They're not just playing all straight. There's movement, like if it's a swing tune, it looks antiquated now, and you go back, you think it's a cartoon almost, but it's not. The music existed to help people and encourage people to dance. They were making money based on their ability to get people to dance. That was the whole point, right? So when that kind of thing, some of it was theater, but most of it was, they were tying their body and the physicality of it to the music. So I always know what I'm going to hear, like in the first few measures of going to hear a jazz group live, if there's not any movement, if the drummer's like ding tock ding tock ding tock ding, it's like no man, it should look like they're invested in their bodies. It should look like Brian Blade when he plays drums, that every motion sort of has a danceability to it, so there's a real physicality to this music. And honestly, for me, I think that's another reason I related to Count Basie more specifically, because in addition to being a guitar player and there'd be guitar parts, luckily, I also just enjoyed the physicality of trying to learn those tunes. And there's trumpet players in the band, or trombone players, particularly brass. I think for Basie, if you're trying to figure out how to play Basie tunes well, it's a lot of physicality in terms of range and tempo and those sort of things too. So I'm gonna just share my computer sound with the really clear. All right, so our first track is Jump For Me, which is early Count Basie featuring Lester Young. classic fade out. So obviously that track is at a dance tempo, right? Hopefully in your mind you're imagining folks moving. You know, you can see it sort of in a movie reel. Probably it's a perfect dance tempo. It's consistent in terms of time and feel from the beginning to the end. The soloists are supporting that feeling in their solos. You know, additionally, Basie plays a lot on it, which if you know a lot about Basie, is not really what he does consistently. He, you know, Basie would be one of those guys, sort of like Duke Ellington, but not really, I guess. You know, Basie basically didn't play that much piano on things. It was very subtle what he added. And we think of Basie being more of a writer, but more of a band leader, or a guy who could keep 18 people together on the road for what was almost, you know, Basie lived a very long time. So his band also lived a very long time. You know, so a band on the road for 50 years kind of thing, right? Like it's hard enough for me to find a bass player and a drummer I want to be around for like a 2-hour gig at the Taubman Museum, let alone like trying to keep 18 guys on the road and all of their specific, you know, financial considerations and all those details. So I might, you know, encourage you to think about that too, that these guys that we're thinking about in Duke Ellington and Count Basie were great leaders, right? Not just band leaders, but great leaders, folks that thought about their brand, thought about what they could do for the music by presenting what they did professionally in every environment they were in. And of course, maybe overly obvious to mention, but they did that, you know, in the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s and in eras within which the civil rights struggle was very real, of course. And they were trying to figure out their way around the country to provide opportunities to generate income for themselves and also play their music for people. So an amazing thing if you think about that kind of leadership. Our next track is Tickle Toe, which I know for a fact that the Virginia Tech Band has an arrangement of, and you've probably played it at some point. So Next, I want to mention the fact that we often forget that these bands were acoustic bands, right? Even in 1989, I saw the Count Basie Orchestra, obviously sans Count Basie, but you know, the band set up on a stage at the Salem Civic Center, and I still couldn't figure out why the bass player and the guitar player were still playing acoustically. I was like, there are amps now. And they were very nice. You know, I was this young kid and they were like, listen, this is acoustic music, right? Like the whole thing is about creating the rhythm that comes, you know, from playing acoustically. And, you know, I'm sure the bass players in the class will know that when you go to a gig without an amp, what you do in terms of the way the sound you get out of your instrument, and definitely as a guitar player, if you're just what you have to do if you're playing an acoustic instrument to still be heard and make sense for the music is a completely different approach technically, that creates a different sound and a different vibe. And again, that comes down to physicality again, because you're buying in a completely different way when you're playing that way. So I know you guys probably know this, but one of the things that the Juilliard Jazz Program does, I think in honor of the fact that most of the time this music is done acoustically, is the bass players and guitar players have to come to class without amps, you know, and try to make sense of that. Now, I also, as a, you know, sort of a more modern thinker and someone who presents jazz a lot, I want the band to sound as good as it can in the environment it's in. So why not use sound support and production support to do that? And they also do that now, but the concept is very much still, this is an acoustic band, you know, this is a band that should be heard and sound good without the benefit of additional support. It also changes dynamics dramatically, which of course you're getting from these recordings, predominantly because they would have been recording around one microphone in the middle of a room, right? So the band has to get quiet when Coleman Hawkins or whoever, you know, comes in and plays, right? You have to set up the band in such a way that you still hear the guitar, right? So it's funny, a lot of the things that we do today in terms of big band setup, right, where people are located on stage, harkens back to that, but a lot of it isn't functional anymore in the same way it was before, right? Another example of this would be the drummer generally should be set up directly next to the second trumpet player, right? Does anybody know why that is? Anybody know why the drummer is historically set up directly next to the second trumpet player? It's because, anyone?
Is the second trumpet most responsible for like the improvisation and arrangements usually?
It's true, but the reason is because they would oftentimes not write a drum part, and he would want to see the second trumpet part so that he knew where the hits were for the band. You know what I mean? Like there was rarely, even in the big band I played in, there were rarely drum charts. So they just set the drummer so he could take a look at the second trumpet part and know like ding 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 pop ding 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 bounce bounce. So they're reading off the second trumpet part oftentimes. You know, isn't that funny? Like you think back at Count Basie and Duke Ellington, you're like, you know, incredibly artistic, well, you know, all this stuff is well organized, but a lot of it was just working class stuff, right? How can we get the drummer to know what's happening in the chart? Now, of course, in Count Basie's scenario, he would play Tickle Toe or the new Basie Blues hundreds of times on the road, so the drummer got to know the tune anyway. But you know, initially, that's one of the benefits of having him so close, because he's. And I guess another point I make is the drums are often conducting the band through those hits that the trumpets and trombones are more likely to have. And you're hearing a lot of that, of course, in these early recordings, that the ensemble playing was almost predominantly done by the saxophone section, right? With the trumpets and trombones doing those hits and sort of expressive and dynamic parts of the tune, which the drummer is always setting up and creating in the chart. All right, so this next track is when I think Basie sort of got into what we think of now as being his definitive brand, which is a band that could really, really play the blues. And this is the new Basie Blues. make sure you take a listen to the tempo here, right? It's pretty slow. And it's hard to play with great feel slow consistently over 3 minutes and 28 seconds, but they do it. Another thing that occurred to me listening to that is the fact that, um, we're often, in bands for a semester or a couple of semesters, right? These guys had the opportunity to tour together for years and years and years and years, right? And so it's easy to sort of underrate the importance of being in a trumpet section with the same 3 or 4 other people for 10 years, but that creates a really consistent ensemble sound. And I'd also say again, these guys were playing these charts every night for 150 night tours, right? So there's a lot of opportunity there to tighten things up and make them great and make it ready for recording too. I think a lot of people romanticize those days, and I get that, because there was an opportunity to be in the studio or do 7 nights at one club with your band and then go into the recording studio and get everything recorded. There's a lot less of that now, and frankly I think musicians are expected to be better musicians to be able to get it right, even though they've never played with any of those guys on the section before. What you lose in that, I think, is a certain kind of you lose the music. Actually, there's a lot of music. There can be a lot of musicianship with very little music happening. So it needs to have an environment to breathe in. And, you know, the reason that environment doesn't really exist anymore in terms of professional reality is that no one has the money to book 18 musicians at the Greenbrier Hotel anymore, you know? I mean, that just doesn't happen, you know? I did some of those last gigs in the 90s and late 80s and early 90s, right? When they would have a party at the Greenbrier and they'd still say, well, let's get the Dennis Reeser Big Band to come up here and play, you know? And that band would be, you know, made, I don't know, $4,000 for a night. So the musicians were making maybe $125. The principal tenor player or, you know, the lead trumpet player might make $200 for that gig, right? So either way, when you can hire a quartet for $1,000 versus the big band for $4,000, you're gonna probably air. So it isn't the fact that the music became dated for people. It was really just a matter of economy. It's cheaper to get a smaller group, you know. So because like obviously a big band is able to play any other kind of music. It's just really the economy of trying to make sense of it. This is a classic, Every Day I Have the Blues with Joe Williams in support of this concept that Basie's brand was really about the blues.
Every day I have the blues. Every day I have the blues. Well, you see me worry, baby, because it's you I hate to lose. Nobody loves me. Nobody seems to care. Nobody loves me, nobody seems to care. Speaking of bad luck and trouble, well, you know I've had my share. I'm gonna pack my suitcase, moving on down the line. Oh, I'm gonna pack my suitcase and move on down the line. Well, there ain't nobody worrying and there ain't nobody crying. Seems to me every day I have the blues. Every day I have the blues. You see me worry, baby, 'cause it's you I hate to lose. Nobody loves me. Nobody seems to care. Nobody loves me. Nobody seems to care. Speaking of bad luck and trouble, you know I've had my share. I am packing up my suitcase. I am moving down the line, yes. Well, ain't nobody nobody worry.
All right, so if you want some other recordings that are just killer, these might be overly obvious, but Sarah Vaughan with the Count Basie Orchestra is just stellar, and Frank Sinatra's records with the Count Basie Orchestra, which you probably know, but Quincy Jones, of course, was the arranger on those early records with Frank and Basie. Killer, just killer. And definitely part of Count Basie's brand has been having a band that was incredibly supportive of great singers. But if I had to pick one, I would probably do the Sarah Vaughan with Count Basie record. I still love that record. Frank Foster just plays killer on that. Great arrangements. Killer. I was going to do Corner Pocket, but there's only a few minutes left. So I'm going to do the chart that I think a lot of us probably came to jazz and jazz bands with. We knew as high school players, if we could play this well, Basie Straight Ahead is the chart. If we could play this well, we could play anything well. And then I got in the Navy band and realized they also felt the same way. If you could play Basie Straight Ahead and do it and make it sound right, then that was sort of a first step to being able to do anything else, you know. All right, sorry to stop that, but time's coming through. So we used to say that that song has every anticipation. Somehow managed to get every possible anticipation into one chart, you know. And it's not easy to play well. It's not easy to play well. It's not easy to play anyway if you're the lead trumpet player, but it's not easy to play well because there's so much going on, so many dynamics, so many ensemble parts, and the feel has to just be perfect the whole time. Very, very hard. You can put that chart in front of any big band in the world and know everything you need to know about that band and the players in it based on how they play that chart. I love that chart. I used to dream about being able to write a chart like that. And then I gave up because I think giving up is a really important part of jazz. Accepting defeat, you know? That's just what I'm doing right now. All right, I'm going to leave you with this. This is Whirlybird, which is one you may not know, but now you will, and I love it. Okay, just a couple other points I want to share with you guys. One is that probably a lot of the musicians that you love, if you love jazz musicians, aren't working that much. So the interesting thing is access to them is probably pretty high right now. If you thought, well, I took a lesson with a guitar player named Pasquale Grasso, who's amazing and taught, he's sitting at home alone, hoping people connect with him to pay $100 for I don't remember, $50. I don't remember what it was, sorry, but for an hour and a half lesson, you know? And so if there's guys out there that you really want to talk to for an hour and, you know, you got some money to support them, they're all mechanized to figure out how to do that right now. So you can really get some stuff done. Pasquale, who's I think probably 28, I don't know, hit me to stuff I had never thought about on the guitar. And I've been playing I did my first gig 34 years ago, 33 years ago. So that's kind of neat, you know? So reach out to the guys that you think you may never get a lesson with and spend some time with them. It's worth it. It's really worth it. And then I'll hit you to just one record that has absolutely nothing to do with Count Basie that I'm loving to add to your list. Ron Miles, who's a horn player, just put out a new record with Brian Blade, Jason Moran, Bill Frisell, and the bass player Thomas Morgan. It's really, 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 really good. In fact, his agent, Chris Meese, just hit me to that record, and it's amazing. So if you're looking for some new music to listen to by some of the greats who are still staying active and recording, despite the fact that they're not touring at all, those are it. Anyway, that's what I got.
Cool. Thanks so much, Cyrus. That was awesome.
Yeah, right on.
Anybody have any questions?
I have a question.
Lisa has a question.
So earlier you mentioned coordinated movement as an aid to performance. And I know that, like, from personal experience, that's up to the discretion of the conductor or like the jazz leader. So what is a way that we can easily communicate with other people if we don't have the opportunity to like move in an ensemble? Like if you want to do a solo and you're trying to communicate with the drummer, how, like, without doing large movements, how can you communicate with them? Do you do eye contact, or do you do like audible cues?
It's eye contact, and I would also encourage spitting on them if they don't pay attention. I've seen that work. Also, I know that what instrument do you play?
I'm a trumpet player.
Yeah, so I also want you to know the reason that you carry that extra bottle of oil is actually to throw at the drummer or bass player. So that's how I would do it. I would not leave an option for them not being in tune with you, you know?
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, I think, you know, your broader point about culturally, what are we doing in a band to look around and make sure that we realize this is a great opportunity to share something amazing with other musicians and create something that really is about eye contact and culture and vibe, you know? I've definitely been on those bands where people were like, I mean, one of the first gigs I did, the bass player was like, "You want me to tune that thing for you?" It's like, no, I can figure it out. You know, there are a lot of assholes in the music, and I never really understood that. I guess they were bitter about the fact the gig only paid $100 or something. So it really is, yes, the conductor creates a climate where people feel like they feel safe being expressive and connecting with people musically. I think that's what does it. And if that doesn't work, throw something at them or spit on them.
Thank you.
That's what I would do.
I think that's great advice to end on.
Yeah.
It's good to see everybody today. Let's thank Cyrus for his time, and have a great weekend.